Welcome to the Craig and Greg Show, presented by Maximize Leadership. Now, here are Craig Owens and Greg Harris.
Hey, welcome back to another episode of the Craig and Greg Show. I'm Craig. This is Greg. A lot of times we like to share with you we've called them leadership killers, some things that can derail your leadership or maybe even just stunt it from going somewhere. But today, as we were talking about this, we actually have to address two, because this is kind of the two-headed monster. This killer, you never see one show up without the other. And I don't know which one comes first, but I'll just do it in alphabetical order. It's arrogance and ignorance. Mm-hmm. And those always come together. There's some people that are ignorant of something and their pride keeps them from admitting that. And there's some people that their pride is so big that they never even see how dumb they actually are with that. So this is, and I'm not kidding you, I mean, I thought about this for a while. It really is a two-headed monster, because it'll not only limit the individual's leadership, it can destroy an entire organization as well. You and I have seen that firsthand with arrogant, ignorant leaders, I got to put it in quotes, inside of an organization that have completely gutted the organization, and it's just a shell of what it used to be.
It's important for us to separate the two heads, right? That's why there's two. The ignorance one you can work on by listening, asking, studying, observing. Mm-hmm. The arrogance is the opposite. You need to reduce the arrogance to become a better leader. Right. The ignorance, you want to increase learning, so you become a little more well-rounded. But I've been around a couple people, maybe you have too. This is probably where you're going to, I got a better story than you. But when they're both, like they have both, that is the double whammy for me.
Yes.
So, Craig, there have been people that, we maybe mutually know, and we won't say their names or anything, but we actually could.
That's right.
To protect the innocent.
If you know we're talking about you, send in your money now and we'll stop talking about you.
Yeah, $20 a month, we'll zip it. But I think the whole ignorance challenges like the patience maybe, and arrogance is like, I'm really being challenged to give you mercy. Yeah. I mean, it's ignorance is a little easier, so let's go with ignorance first. Why do we still have that in leadership? What kind of holds us back in ignorance? Like, we should reduce ignorance if we got good people around us, not just us. So where have you learned about ignorance in leaders?
Well, all of us, you said it earlier, we're not know-it-alls. We don't know everything. So there is always an area that we don't know something. And so the way that psychologists map it out is that we start off at the spot where it's called being unconsciously incompetent. I'm not good in an area, but I don't even know that I'm not good in that area because maybe I've never stepped into it before. I don't know that I'm no good at, say, pitching a baseball because I've never pitched a baseball. So I don't have the skill, but I don't know that I don't have the skill. And that's where a lot of us are. But then something should come on our radar screen and we move to the next level that is now we are consciously incompetent. Now I'm aware that I don't know this. And so now that's where a decision has to come in. Am I just going to stay here? Am I going to make excuses for this? Or will I start learning? If we start learning, we can move into consciously competent. I know what I need to do, but maybe maybe you have your steps written out. Like I know what I need to do, but I still got to go back to my checklist just to make sure. And then once we do it long enough, then we can move into a spot where we're now unconsciously competent. We can just do it without looking at the steps anymore. We just know how to do it. But it starts off with that spot. Something happens that makes us aware. And this is where I think the two-headed part comes in, is because the arrogance could then just make excuses and say, I don't need to learn anything there. Or the humility could come in and say, wow, I don't know something. I need to learn it.
Mm-hmm. Followers, associates, teammates, whatever terminologies we like to use. What happens when we, the followers, associates, teammates, sense someone is ignorant and they're above us, right, in the hierarchical org? How do you do that?
Yeah, that's hard, especially if you do have the person, like I remember working with somebody that,
Tell me their name. Tell me their name.
you know who you are, send in your money now, and I won't share it. That you,
Was it a gal or a guy?
I would see something in this person that where this could be a potential area of growth, and then say to them, hey, here's a book that I read that really benefited me. And then it was just kind of, you could tell it was like, okay, they're not going to read that book.
No.
So, but what happens is after a while, I think those people on the team, they stop even sharing their ideas. Why would I even share an idea with you? Because you're not going to do anything with it. You're just kind of, you're asking for my input just because you think that that's what you're supposed to do, but you've already decided what you're going to do. And so it just, it really alienates you. You know, when you start to see, it's not leaders that are being brought up to the top. There's been people that eventually they're just checking out, and those organizations typically have high turnover because people say this is too frustrating staying here, and I'm going somewhere else. And that's very characteristic of having a leader at the top that is not willing to admit that they don't know everything.
What does it do when the leader does that? Admits.
It's huge when the leader at the top says, I'm not sure, I need your help, I made a mistake here, and apparently I need more information. What a refreshment that brings to everybody else, because they go, well, yeah, we already knew this. And the fact that you admit it, then far from, and I think the reason why a lot of top leaders don't want to admit it is because then they think that they lose credibility.
Yeah.
But I think it's the exact opposite. I think that everybody else goes, thank you, you're a real person.
I don't know, is it Madagascar or King Julian?
Yeah.
And he
King
thought,
Julian.
Yeah. Can you do that impersonation or not?
No.
I wish Austin was here. He could do it. Anyway, so he thinks everybody loves following him.
Yeah.
And I think that's where the ignorance kind of loses the associates, teammates, followers, because you're like, after you're done talking and we go back to our cubicles, we all know you don't know it.
Right.
But you still think, you know, we are just wowed by you.
Right.
I think there's some honesty even in the leader to say, yeah, I think they're going to probably call BS on that one. That's just not, I'm not going to bluff them. Well, why would you bluff them anyway?
Right.
Arrogance. Let's go to that side. So this is Dumb and Dumber. I don't know which one it is, if it's Jeff or Jim, but it's a pretty good movie. We don't get any money for saying this, but we should.
Yes.
We're putting a plug in. Arrogance. How toxic is that, and where do you see it often?
Yeah. Well, you know, so going back to that chart that I talked about before of, I don't know that I know good. I'm not even aware of it. The arrogance can keep you in that spot, because when it does come on your radar screen, you'll excuse it away and you'll stay there. But if you go all the way around and you have become unconsciously competent at something, you can then say, the arrogance will say, I've arrived. I don't need to learn anything anymore.
I have that title.
Yes. I've arrived to the title, to the office, to the
I've
whatever.
been here 20 years.
Yeah. I graduated. I got the degree. So I don't need to learn anything else. You know, those kind of things. Well, now that arrogance keeps you there. And, you know, where I'll see that sometimes is somebody who is teaching a class, and you're like, you're teaching the same way that you taught 20 years ago. And the world has moved on. Technology has gone on. There's been advancements, but you, in your arrogance, have said, nope, the way that I taught it 20 years ago is the way that it still needs to be taught right now. And the arrogance will keep you trapped. So I think that unconscious incompetence and the conscious competence can really kind of like flow right back into being unconsciously incompetent again, because your arrogance won't let you admit that you need to keep learning something.
Coachability. I wonder sometimes, humility seems to be a word no one wants to talk about. Like, just be humble. Well, that's just a weak person. Huh? That's probably a really healthy person, but apparently, you know, humility is not high on your list. Potentially, coachability might really be that litmus test of, is a leader going to stay in that unconscious, incompetent box?
Sure.
Let's talk about coachability. What are a couple of those qualities of a leader or an associate that we should be really propping up in our organizations on why arrogance and ignorance can be modified, minimized with just a coachable heart?
Sure. In my book, Shepherd Leadership, I tried to make...
that's a good book.
Hey, another plug. I tried to make the point that most leaders are naturally wired to be confident or to lean towards humility, and neither one is bad, but we're looking for the tension. And I think the coachability comes from both sides. You don't want the humble person saying, okay, well, I don't know anything. You guys are so much better than me. That could be, way overplayed. Same thing on the confident side, to say, I know everything. I don't need to listen to anybody. Charge, let's just go. Right. There does need to be that balance. And I think both sides need the coachability to say, hey, you know what? You're the leader. So even though you might think this about other people, or maybe you think less about yourself, you are the leader. So let me infuse some confidence in you. But if you're like, well, I'm all that, and a bag of chips, and I don't need anything else, you need the coachability to say, oh, let's dial that back a little bit. And so there needs to be that healthy balance. But it's, again, going back to our killer words, you have to have the capacity to say, yes, I am going one way or the other. And yes, I am willing to get information. I'm willing to learn something. And if you don't say yes to both of those things, you're derailing your leadership, or at least hampering how far it can go.
I wonder, Craig, if a leader was just so transparent in this arrogance, ignorance drama and said, I'm not there yet, but when I first started, I was very ignorant because I didn't know enough. And as I got going, I became arrogant, thinking I knew enough. And this happened. And this taught me, sometimes it's the experiences. Well, if we could model that as leaders and actually start with, like we've laughed in previous podcasts, I've said this to you, even over bagels, I could probably write a really good book on good business moves. I could write a trilogy on things that didn't go good.
Yes.
When you say that to a group, it kind of takes the air out of that balloon of, yeah, he's really good. I mean, he's very successful. Oh, she is, I can't even compete. Then you start off with that. What's the benefit of that?
Yeah. Well, I mean, like when you say something like, when somebody goes, boy, that really surprised me. And when you say, yeah, it surprised me too. Yeah. And they're like, oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, you're just like us. That's what I think, and sometimes you have to learn, so I love reading. I used to, when I was a kid, I would read things that were probably a little bit over my head, but I had a notebook where I'd write down words. I don't know that word, and I'd look up the definition. Well, then later on, I'd make it a game to try to use those words. Well, most of the time I'd have to use them with people who were much older than me, because I'm just a kid. So I'd have to find older people. But after a while, I forgot about my audience. And I remember one time somebody saying something to me when in kind of our staff meeting time. They said, I don't understand a lot of the things that you say. And I said, like, the concepts are too hard. Give me some feedback. They said, the words are too big. I don't know what some of those words mean. And I went, I thought for a second, my first response was, I'm not going to dumb this down. You should get smarter, or something like that. And I thought, well, that's not right. And then I said to them, you know what? Thank you for being honest with me. Thank you for sharing that, because that was a blind spot for me. I didn't see that.
Exactly.
And then I started going back through my notes, and I'd look at each, some of these words and say, do I really need to use that word? It's a fun word to say, but can I say it a little simpler to make sure everybody gets it?
Yeah.
And I think that's what if you will listen to what people are saying to you, when you will ask them to repeat back to me, what did you hear in what we're doing? And if you're honest enough to go, oh man, they didn't get that. I'm going to put it on me. I didn't convey it right. Yeah. When you do that consistently, your team will be right there with you. But if you keep saying, it's you guys, you need to get on my page, your team's going to get farther and farther away from your page.
Right.
So I love this description. I don't know if you know who said it, but you had this quote that you found that you shared with me about if arrogance was a creature. Yeah. Share that, because this is what begins to happen here.
I was looking for, I like descriptive words like adjective, or really cool verb like this engages or activates that subject. So I happened to, if arrogance was a creature, I immediately went to like a movie or a cartoon. And basically it was, if arrogance was a creature, it wouldn't have any senses. Senses like obligation, senses of empathy, sense of understanding, right. Sense of right and wrong, I guess, just any senses. Right. Smell, taste, whatever. It would have a sharp tongue and pointed fingers. And I thought, almost like, what's the movie Wolverine with the hands that come out?
Yeah.
Like that's almost what it felt like when I read that. I'm thinking, if it was a creature. So arrogance is so tough to be around.
Because it's always going like this. Whenever somebody says something, well, that's your fault. You need to.
You knew better.
It's never this. And so when I read that, I thought, that is a barometer of how many times am I talking to people like this versus how many times am I going like this
or together.
Yeah. This is where the finger needs to go.
I happened just to type it in just to do a little research, like, is there a creature, character, image, caricature? And that quote came up and I'm like, wow.
Yeah.
It made it kind of come to life like a person. And that's what I think we need to make sure listeners understand, that ignorance and arrogance, they are creatures.
Yes.
And they can so limit leadership.
Especially if you keep feeding them.
Well, and feeding them by either not doing something or continuing to do something that, is not going to get you. The old definition of insanity, keep doing something, different outcome.
Right.
I think for us, Craig, maybe share something where you're like, I saw ignorance and arrogance, or one of them, in a leader that they really changed. I think the audience needs encouragement from verses like, yeah, that's a bad thing. Okay, but is there anybody that's ever overcome that? Right.
I hope that I have.
Right.
I sometimes I look back in my younger, immature days, the way that I'd run over people because I had all the answers. I knew how to do it. And it took a couple of times of like running into some, like, why are these people arguing with me? And then
defensive.
Right. And then me getting my pointing finger out. Oh, it's your problem. It's your fault that you're not. And to go, this, I don't think it's supposed to be combative. Yeah. And so if I feel like I'm fighting, then I need to change something. I need to look in the mirror here and say, what's going on? And I think that what really, that's where the couple of verses where Jesus says in Matthew chapter 7, before you go to somebody else.
Did you see something?
Yeah. Especially because what you're seeing there is just a little speck. You better pull out the mirror and look first at yourself and go, because a lot of times what you spot in other people, you only spot it because it's in you. Mm-hmm. And so I made it a practice when I would hear something going on with one of my teammates that maybe they were misbehaving, they weren't operating up to the standard, I'd go into the bathroom in my office, close the door, and I would put myself nose to nose with the mirror. And I just look at myself and I'd say, what have I done? What's in my eye that's caused my teammate to act this way? Mm. I had to examine myself first before I go to them.
That's key.
Yes. Yeah. And so, I remember when a great friend of mine that wrote an endorsement for Shepherd Leadership. He works with pastors all over the world. And he said to me, he said, Craig, every pastor should read your book. But the pastors that need to read it most won't, because they don't think that they need to. And I don't know that there's any, you and I can't give a cure to somebody who's arrogant and ignorant. They're just going to have to eventually say, I'm really tired of running into this wall. I'm really tired of having this argument. I'm really tired of all the turnover in my staff and the lack of morale. And they're going to have to get nose to nose with themselves, right, and take their finger from pointing out here and point it back like this and say, I need to make a change, and then admit that to their team. And like I said before, when you admit it to your team, they're not going to be like, what? They're going to say, thank you for finally acknowledging that.
Coachability, kind of key. Start with yourself, examination. Is there anything else, like, would you have something to, it's like, this is a really easy, actionable point regarding ignorance and kind of moving on from being that, whatever ignorant status we're in. What would you say?
Well, I would say the big thing is you have to stop talking and start listening. That's
okay.
That's the thing. The arrogant, ignorant person talks an awful lot, and they never listen. And you're just going to have to ask questions instead of make statements, and then shut your mouth and listen. And truly listen, not just, okay, I'm trying to figure out how to respond to this person, or I'm trying to justify what they're saying to me. Truly say, thank you for that input. Right? I need to take that back and work on that.
One last thing, I think know-it-alls. We've always had them, in our own neighborhoods, or a baseball team, or church, or our own sales group, or whatever. The know-it-alls are really tough to cheer for. But if we're going to lead everyone, we might have to eat a little humble pie and try to be that leader that know-it-all needs, because they can send the rest of the great people job
absolutely
hunting.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, there can be a turnover in your staff because of a know-it-all team member.
And who doesn't know it all? Right.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is where we like to do with our coaching. See, we can be that independent third party, and we'll just come in and observe. We can observe you and your interaction with the rest of your team. We can ask some questions and then just say, hey, listen, we've got no skin in this game. We're an impartial observer, and we can be able to help you. So what you can do is go to Maximize Leadership and MaximizeLeadership.com, fill out the form that's under the coaching page, and just say, you know what, I think that I want to take my leadership a little bit farther. I feel trapped. I feel maybe some of those symptoms we talked about before. There's a lot of staff turnover, and I don't know how to address this thing. Just fill that out. Greg and I will look at that. We'll get back to you and say, we've got a plan. Here's what we'd like to do to work with you, to coach you. And if you're willing to listen, you can slay that dragon, that two-headed monster of arrogance and ignorance, and it's going to be better for you. It's going to be better for your team. It's going to be better for the whole organization if that happens. That's what we want to be able to do for you. We also want to be able to help you out with any general questions that you have, or maybe topics that you want to discuss. So you can go to Maximize Podcast on Twitter, and maybe give us an idea of an episode, something that you'd like us to discuss, or just leave a comment right below here on this video. But use us as a resource. That's what we want to do, is pour into you so that your leadership can soar. So make sure that you stay tuned as well. Got lots more content that's coming up, and we want you to be a part of it all. Stay tuned.
Get in touch with Craig and Greg through Twitter at Maximize Podcast or at MaximizeLeadership.com. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss any episodes of The Craig and Greg Show.